Good afternoon, everyone. If you don't know who I am, I'm Steph. I'm one of the leaders here at Telford Minster. And I'm going to start by, I have a confession to make. I've not always listened. I've broken a lot of rules. Not done what the scriptures have said. I thought I was better than what's said. I thought I was better than other people. I've made mistakes and I've not listened. And I'm a Church of England vicar. We all have things that we carry that we would claim are wrong, or things that we just know that we've made mistakes. We've missed the mark. We've not listened to God's will and what he has to say over us. And when we hear these words of the 10 Commandments, they are weighty. There's some big things that we are called not to do. And over my life, particularly as a teenager, I was challenged continually by my peers of, it's really boring being a Christian because it restricts you. That's what they were meaning. They said other things that were a bit unkind, but that's what they meant. It restricts you at university. It restricts you being a Christian. Even to my family now and friends, they still make jokes. I've got 2 really good friends that own a pub, and they always joke if the vicar says anything that's a little bit out of turn. So we were doing a pub quiz with them, and then my friend Joe just went, "The vicar made me do it," because they thought that would be really funny. I don't even know what I made them do, to be honest. But it's a shock when, as Christians, as practicing Christians, we do things that people think, oh, you can't do that, that's not right. That doesn't feel right, that doesn't gel. But I'm going to unpack with you today these 10 Commandments. You could do a half an hour talk at each one, going through the history, the Greek, what does each thing actually mean and do. But actually what we're going to do today is we're going to look at what it means to follow biblical law. And in doing so, how we are set free. So are you all with me? So over my life, I say that I broke the laws and I've done things wrong, but as a child, for me, following the rules, it was the way. Following the rules was the way. And I was terrified of getting in trouble. So I would do everything that my parents had said, everything my teachers had said, everything that my Rainbows leader had said. I would do it perfectly and correctly and rightly. And if I heard of anybody else who had done something wrong, I was the child that go, I'm going to tell on you. That was me. I was that child. And going to secondary school, I made it my mission to never, ever, ever get a detention. You know what? I never did. Got held back in class for talking a little bit, no surprise there, but I never got a detention. I played a lot of sport where rules were necessary for play, and it would infuriate me when a bad ref had missed when the wing attack had gone over the lines in netball. It would drive me mad. And even now, when my husband and we love rugby, and if there's a bad ref, it's clear in the room that we think they're a bad ref. Because it annoys me when rules are not kept to. But there came a point in my life where I thought, actually, life's more fun when you break the rules. And one night I stayed over at a friend's house, and I knew that this friend was allowed to play out. I don't know if anybody remembers that language from when they were younger. That was very much, I grew up in, I finished secondary school in 2011, just to give you an idea of what era I'm talking about. And play out meant roaming around the streets, maybe end up in a park with a cheap bottle of cider. That's what playing out was. Or you might play a bit of knock door run, or just generally be a bit irritating to the local residents. But I wasn't allowed to do this. I could go to any sports club, youth club, whatever, but doing that wasn't allowed. But I could stay over at a friend's house. I could even go to the park in the day, but not on a Friday evening. But this evening was my moment. I could finally be one of the cool kids. I'd really built it up in my mind. And to begin with, it was fun, I think. Because what I actually remember was hating being there, being scared and wanting to go home. I didn't feel safe, and what I was seeing wasn't right either. They were children terrorising people, in my view. And as an adult, both my sister and I have chatted quite openly to my mum and dad about that we were so glad our parents had these rules to keep us safe. I never played out again at night after that. And that didn't help my cool status. But faith became more prevalent in my life, and I would get comments like, being a Christian is so boring. You have to follow the rules and stuff. But what I could tell you is the rules and stuff, they kept me safe. I had no theology for this, no kind of idea where this came from. I just picked it up and just knew it was there to keep me safe. So when I walked away from faith, as I felt like partying and sex and drinking were more fun at university, it was the return of faith was when I didn't feel safe anymore. That was the root of my return. It says in 1 Corinthians 10:23, everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Breaking the rules, doing things that the Bible guides us and tells us not to do. When I did those things, all I did was hurt myself and actually hurt others around me too. I fell out with friends in that season when I went to university. I damaged my health in that time. The things that I once loved, I then didn't partake in anymore because I would rather do this route. Yes, there were some really fun times, but in the long run, it wasn't very beneficial. Countless times I'm asked, isn't being a Christian boring? Isn't it restrictive? Aren't those rules outdated? And I know that rules and laws have been used in a way that do hurt people, that do manipulate people, but those aren't God's rules. And I just want you to acknowledge that while as I speak, those aren't God's rules, the ones that restrict and hurt and manipulate you. Those are ones of the earth. Because the rules of God, the laws of God, the ones that we have in our Bible, they are the ones that lead to a life without pain and hurts. A life in all its fullness, a life of freedom, a life to set us free. You see, these 10 commandments are not about restriction, but about freedom. They are God's foundational law of liberty that were given to the Israelites on Mount Sinai after he'd already rescued them from slavery in Egypt. These commandments weren't a way to earn God's favor. Israel had been chosen already to be set free. Instead, they were instructions on how to live as free people, shaping them into a community that reflected God's character and lived in right relationship with him and one another. They were there to free them. But if we just have a think about it for a moment, these commands are nearly all negative. Don't do this, don't do that. But a negative command is often more freeing than a positive one. A positive command restricts life to one course of action. You can go through the door. But a negative command leaves every other option open except the one that leads to harm. In Eden, God's single command is do not eat from the tree of life. Do not eat from this tree is what it says. Do not eat from this tree, which meant Adam and Eve were free to eat wherever else they wanted to eat. Yeah? There was many other trees in the garden. There wasn't just that one. They could eat anywhere. But human nature always seems to want the thing we're told to avoid. See it in The Simpsons with Bart Simpson. Don't press that red button. What does he do? He presses the red button. We see this in children. Literally, as I wrote this talk, or was writing this on Thursday, we're in the stage where we have locks on all the cupboards, so she can't get into anything. So we have this special magnet, but there's one cupboard that we can't put a lock on. It's an IKEA one. It's just not going to happen. And we put a tower up against it, like one that she stands on to help with us, so she can't get into this. But neither of us have pushed it back, and she got in, and it's the one with the wine glasses in. So suddenly we hear this like clink, 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 smash, and as she cries with all this glass everywhere. There was plenty of things in her house that was free to play with. So many toys that she could have chosen. And she wanted the one thing she couldn't. And it's always the way. They always want to go to the things that they can't. But we do that to protect them. Not to harm them, but to protect them. And God's commandments work the same way. They aren't there to restrict joy. They're there to protect us and lead us to freedom. It's the same with traffic lights. If we were all to go through on red, there'd be so many car crashes, wouldn't there? They are there to keep us safe and get to our destination. One guideline that brings freedom to explore the many possibilities of the world or that place or that situation. And so we have the 10 Commandments, and each one of them is there to bring us freedom. To say, don't do this, but actually, this will bring you life. Now, these 10 Commandments, there's been so many moments in the Bible, and there are so many where prophets received word from God. They've come from the prophets, but in this situation, Moses actually hears the word from God. It is significant. The other Israelites can't even cope as he comes down from the mountain. It says at the end, let me just find it. The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. When these words were brought, it was intimidating. It was there to bring some kind of level of fear. To say, this is what to do. This is how to be. This is how to live as my people. There was meant to be some fear there. But these words, they were heard by God's voice, and they are significant for us to follow. But they're not there to give us this sense of dread of faith. They are there to bring life. So if we look at each one, the first one is saying to us, just actually read what it actually says. You shall have no other gods before me. What does that teach us? That teaches us freedom from false security. You put your trust in another God, it's not going to get you anywhere. The next one is, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven, above the earth and beneath or waters below. That's saying no idols. What does that teach us? Freedom from chasing empty things. The only one worth following is God. Don't misuse God's name. That's given us freedom to speak in truth and honour. Not there to lie or deceive. Not there to say, well, God said I've got to do this, when actually that's not truth. It's freedom to speak in the truth and the power of what he's given us and called us to be and do. It includes, of course, disrespectful use of cursing and slandering and blaspheming and swearing and speaking ill of people. It causes us not to attribute things to God which are not him as well. and it prohibits us from claiming God's authority for our own actions and decisions. And then we have in Exodus 8 to 11, it talks about rest and Sabbath. Keep the Sabbath. And that teaches us to be free from burnout and striving in a culture where burnout and to be at a place of burnout shows that you have done enough. That's what culture is telling us at the moment. If you aren't tired, you haven't done enough. We are literally told to rest. It even says for your slaves to rest, everyone to rest. It was to protect everybody in the town, all of God's people, rest. And from there, fruit will come. Freedom from burnouts. Honour your parents. Honour your mother and father. It teaches us the importance of respect and guidance and care. It reminds us that strong families create foundations for a healthy society. And strong relationships with one another. It's not just about biological parents, but it's respecting those in authority in society, and respecting those senior to you, those that love you, care for you, walk with you. Every relationship, though, is difficult, isn't it? Even the person that you love the most, there'll be times when you have fractious conversations and difficult seasons. But we are called to honour one another, to set healthy boundaries, to seek to live in a way that reflects God's love. We honour our parents, honour our seniors, honour our loved ones. We will find freedom in relationships, freedom to care and love one another in our communities. The next one is do not murder. I think we've probably all seen enough films to show, or see enough in the news to know how destructive that can be. It has real implications, and for some people, it is literally part of their everyday life. And it's not just murder, though. It's anger. Is not being loving. It's about harming one another in our words as well. Ultimately, this commandment challenges us to promote peace, responsibility, and safety in our communities. Do not murder is to give us freedom from hate and revenge. We might not have ever felt like we want to go and murder someone, but we might have sat in the car and gone, oh, why has that person cut me up? Why is that person's really irritating me? See, you have, haven't you? I know some of you have driving anger issues. And we laugh about it, but we are to speak lovingly of one another. To not be angry at each other. And it consumes us when we're angry, when we are bitter. It can take our life away, our joy away. Do not murder, freedom from hate and revenge. Do not commit adultery. It's freedom to love with integrity. If we're committing adultery, we're lying, we're disrespecting someone, we are hurting someone, we're hurting many people. Freedom to love with integrity. Do not steal. Freedom from greed. We always want what we can't have, and we might be tempted to do so. It might even start with a little thing as a child, like taking that chocolate or cake that we shouldn't have. But if we are to live as God's people, we need to be free from greed. And do not lie. I don't know how much I need to expand on that. It's freedom to live in truth. To live in the truth of God, to not be unkind, to not speak ill. But also, if we start to lie, we lack integrity. If you are a person that is lying, no one's going to believe you, because you will be found out. And when we're honest with ourselves and others, we see situations clearly and can act with wisdom. It prevents unnecessary hurt, broken relationships, and mistrust. As I go through this, there's one more to go, but if we do one, it's so easy to go to another. So lying, murder, adultery, dishonor, you could end up doing them all so quickly once you started doing one. And finally, do not covet, which means longing for what others have. Who here has ever compared themselves to someone else? And that feel hurtful, feel painful. Social media, you scroll through, there is someone I follow and I was like, oh, you've really nice clothes and you always run holiday and I'd love that life. And I do look at it, and I also will show to Harry, to my husband, and say, oh, look what this influencer's doing again. And it consumes like my news feed, my Instagram feed. And what does that do? It's a false world. It's so easy to compare ourselves, but it's so damaging too. To want what someone else has. And I know of all of these, it's probably the one I struggle with the most. But each of these commandments guards something essential for a life of joy and peace, not to imprison us, but free us. They are pathways to life, guiding us safely. And these commandments, all of them though, they point to Jesus. In John 8, it says, so if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. And in all of this, these commandments, we see them then throughout the whole Bible. We see laws everywhere. In Leviticus, it's literally a book of the law. And these laws are all summarized in these commandments. And they're all kind of disjointed and all over like, oh, you can't have these two pieces of fabric can't be woven together. That was there so that tribe would be distinguished. And if you look like another tribe, you'd be hurt. Do not eat these things. Well, if you're going to eat those things, you're probably going to get food poisoning and be really ill. But these laws, and they're all kind of disjointed and all over the place, but isn't that what life is like? We come across different laws and rules and situations where we need to think about what we do, and they vary from one person to the next every single day. But these laws, these things in our Bible, they are worth repeating, even if they don't add anything new. Repetition in the Bible is just as important, and when a parent says, how many times do I have to tell you this? That's what the commentary I was reading said. Repetition in the Bible is just as important as when a parent says, how many times do I have to tell you this? Because aren't there some truths that are just worth keep saying? Teachers will know the truth of saying don't rock back on your chair is worth repeating for the amount of children that have really hurt themselves when the chair goes backwards. But think of them as the heart of everything that God calls his people to do. And Jesus made this very, very clear when he summed it all up, the whole law, with two simple and powerful commands. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbour as yourself. Everything in Scripture, from the law to the prophets, is built on these two truths. The 10 Commandments aren't outdated, rigid rules. They help us to live our love for God and others today. They are to bring us freedom. So, as we hear all these things, I want to also talk to you, just quickly at the end now. It's not quickly, sorry, Lord, just give me a moment. All of these laws, rules, this whole Bible, Yes, it's there to bring us freedom, but it's also some serious stuff. And I started at the end by saying, I have a confession to make. Because all of us here will have a time when these things are all summarized up, even in the words of Jesus, of love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbour as yourself. But how many times have we failed to do that? So in a moment, I want to lead us in a prayer of lament, a time to say sorry to God. Lament means to carry the pain, not to just dismiss it, but it's something we have got to carry and deal with in our own time with God. So we'll do that in a moment. But I want to summarize this as well. These commandments, this book in general, with all its laws and things and teachings, whatever anyone says, it's not restrictive. It's not outdated. It's not designed to make life dull or difficult. Instead, it's God's way of leading us to a life in all its fullness, of freedom from fear, from chaos, destruction, to live a life full of joy, of peace and of purpose. You wouldn't have a purposeful rugby or football game without some rules around it. It just wouldn't work. It'd be chaos. God's commandments create space for us to thrive, for loving relationships with Him and with others. So here's our challenge. How do we do that? What needs to change in our life? What do we need to bring before God where you've been angry, you've compared, you've put other things above God? Where have you not loved the Lord your God with your whole heart, body, and mind? It says in John 8:36, so if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. And I want every single one of you here today to live in that freedom.